At Dave Cooper Live, we connect the industry leaders in the architectural, engineering, and construction space with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. At Dave Cooper Live, we connect the industry leaders in the architectural, engineering, and construction space with the people, the products, and the processes to help them build it better. Welcome everyone to Dave Cooper Live, where we bring you the people, the products, and the processes helping us all to build it better. In this community, we talk about constructing healthy, sustainable places and spaces, homes and buildings where we can do more than survive, we can thrive. In the spirit of thriving, we're going to welcome today's guest. You may know him from his work at Blockable, a prefab housing solution designed to transform traditional construction methods into efficient manufacturing processes, a vertically integrated business model that incentivizes continuous innovation and cost reduction. But today, we're going to discuss physical and mental health and transformation, sharing a very personal story of trauma and triumph, guiding countless others to health and wellness on this first day of Mental Health Awareness Month. So, with that said, we can't do any of this without all of our sponsors and all of our supporting members out there. So, a quick word from them. Forward Solutions Group is successfully driving companies to succeed where others have failed. Are you looking to start a factory, optimize your existing factory, streamline your production, or take your team to the next level? Whatever your needs are, Forward has a solution for you. Reach out to Ben at forwardsolutionsgroup.com. Heartache Ltd. has a long history of innovation in cold form steel manufacturing and producing innovative precision roll forming technology for customers throughout the United States and the world. Check out their machine buyer's guide for offsite modular construction or fast build construction with light steel for framing. Go to their website, HeartacheLtd.com. Brought to you by Greatech, one of the largest Autodesk partners globally and software developer of the PowerPack Advanced Design, Advanced Steel, and the StruxSoft product line. The complete solution to automate wood and light gauge steel framing, design, and documentation all the way out to CNC output, model, design, and manufacture with StruxSoft. Learn more at StruxSoftSolutions.com. All right, again, thank you to all of our sponsors, and please go and say thank you yourself. We can't bring you all these informative and innovative conversations without them. So, without further ado, let's bring on Aaron Holm to the stage. Aaron, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it. It's good to kick off Mental Health Awareness Month.
You know what? It is good to kick off Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's funny, as time marches on in my life, I realize more and more every day how much of a pandemic mental health is becoming across the country. And, I think having somebody like yourself who's going to give us an amazing story of triumph and survival and everything else, what you're doing to advance the cause and awareness to help people be better is amazing. But, Aaron, before we get into it, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born to this very moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital. And there's a lot of it, so we'll get into that. Or we will have your mother on the show, and it could get quite embarrassing for you. But you only have 2 minutes. Go for it.
All right, 2 minutes. Well, I grew up in Toronto. I had a single mother. I didn't really know my father growing up. So that became part of the picture later on. Grew up moving around a lot. So, apartments, I think we moved like 9 times before I was 5 or 6. So knew a lot about sort of housing and all that type of stuff growing up as a kid. I was an athlete in high school and college. So I was the captain of the University of Toronto volleyball team, where I had my first sort of heart incident, which I can talk about later. And then sort of had a head for technology and business and became an entrepreneur and moved down to the States in 2001 and founded a series of companies. I built a software consulting company that I ran for a year and a half, and then sold that. And then with a partner built a technology and SaaS business in New York City and LA from 2005 to 2012 that became the backbone of all major photo production in the US for like Warner Brothers and Showtime and NBC. And then sold that to private equity and moved out to Seattle and co-founded a consumer software company that's still growing. And then spent a few years at Amazon working on the physical retail business. So the cashierless grocery, and launched the bookstore. And then started Blockable in 2006 and built a cool company doing some amazing innovation around multifamily housing. And then had a heart attack and heart surgery in 2018, which was pretty transformative, which will be a lot of what we'll talk about today. So that's the 2 minute overview.
Well, I'll tell you what, you nailed it right there with the 2 minutes. And you know what? You're right. We're here to talk about mental health. We're here to talk about, what stress is doing to people. Some of it genetic, some of it stress. I think today, and maybe you can just clarify, but I think today the life is more stressful because of this social media. There's never an off button. There's never a downtime anymore. And I think people work harder and don't take care of themselves anymore.
I think so, but I also think you were right at the beginning in talking about the pandemic and sort of the effects of that. I mean, a lot of the impact can be seen in isolation. You know, people feeling alone, people feeling like they have to, whether it's chronic stress or issues or business, just feeling like they're disconnected. So people, when they feel disconnected, often feel isolated, and that can lead to a lot of problems. Six in 10 people in the U.S. have at least one chronic illness, major chronic illness.
Six and
500,
10.
60%. A large percentage of people have multiple chronic illnesses. So the thing that I experienced through my journey was just that the body, everything comes out in the body. The body stores everything, and it can do it for a long time, and then it can't. And when it can't, then it no longer really matters how much you're stuffing in there. It's gonna start to make its way out, and when it makes its way out, it's a real opportunity to kind of wake up and change the way you work in the world. And that was my experience.
So on this channel, Aaron, we have a lot of CEOs, executive directors, investment bankers all watching, who's on and what we're doing. So you were at Blockable as a CEO when you had your heart attack, correct?
I was co-CEO when I
Yep.
started. I was a CEO, and then was co-CEO when I had the heart surgery in 2018.
So you were in a very high stress level, position. You're
Mhm.
trying to grow a company. You have all the ups and downs of doing that. But at the same time, you were like a super fit guy. I mean, you were a college athlete. You were training for a triathlon. It seemed like you were healthy and happy. Every time I met you, you were always healthy and
Mhm.
or at least looked healthy and happy. Um, but heart disease almost took your life.
Well, heart disease is funny like that because the symptoms don't always show themselves until it's really late in the process. So,
Right.
part of why I was so healthy and why I was so fit was likely a result of me trying to overcompensate. Right. So I was a marathon runner. I was a competitive athlete. I was an all-city basketball player in high school, and then I was an athlete in college, and I played beach volleyball, and I was very athletic. Um, and then looking back, at the marathon running and the triathlons and all that, I mean, a certain amount of it was to overcompensate from the fact that I knew that I had heart disease, but I wasn't doing anything about it for a whole bunch of reasons, which it probably makes sense to get into at some point. So.
Well, you know what? I think we're all like that. And I have my own story and I'll touch on that as well. But I think the important part, if you're watching today, today is for everybody out there. Don't assume that things are okay. Really take to heart, no pun intended, what we're talking about here, because it happened to me, it happened to you and so many others out there. And throughout the month, we're going to have a couple other companies on that you're probably going to know, and you're watching this. And between suicides and heart attacks and everything else, there's some major issues going on out there. And as leaders, we got to be aware of it. We need to be able to see it, not only in ourselves, but in the people that we work with. So, Aaron, I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation and really diving in. So why don't you walk us through your symptoms? Because before the show, you said, yeah, man, I knew I had it for a year, but just, you didn't want to deal with it. You just kept pushing through, being like most guys, suck it up and drive on, or you just maybe thought you trained too hard.
Well, I mean, it goes back further. I mean, it started, when I was a kid. I kind of grew up, I had a single mom, and I was just alone a lot of the time. So that's how I learned to work with the world, and that has, all kinds of different implications. On the one side, I was pretty fearless and risk taking because I was used to taking care of myself. But on the other side, I didn't really grow up expressing, my male role model was my grandfather, who was, in the Canadian Boxing Hall of Fame, pretty stoic character. So I kind of, learned about, what it is to be a man and communicate with folks like that. When I was in college, when I was an athlete in college, I had two diagnoses kind of back to back. And the first one was an arrhythmia. So I have an arrhythmia that I've known about. It's not dangerous, but it's, can take my breath away sometimes. But I've had an arrhythmia that I've known about since my 20s. And I went to my doctor and I said, I've got this arrhythmia going on. A guy in the basketball team had collapsed in practice, and I thought I should really go take a look at this because I wanted to make sure it wasn't a big issue. So I went to my doctor and he sent me to a cardiologist. The cardiologist prescribed medication. And so I took the medication. I was young, I was 20, 21, 22. And I took the medication before a match. So we played a match that night at home in front of fans. And during the match, I had a reaction and I started to, my vision started to collapse. My hearing started to collapse. And I fell on my knees and I was dragging myself over to the bench, trying not to pass out because I thought I was going to die. And, I hauled myself out of the gym and I got my heart to calm down. And then I ended up spending the night in the hospital. And then a couple of days later, the doctor called me and he said, we ran a blood screen while we were checking your heart for the arrhythmia. And you've got, severely elevated cholesterol, like 400 level cholesterol with an LDL above 300. So we want you to come in. And I went in and they said, you're going to have to take medication for the rest of your life. My doctor literally said, if you don't take statins, you'll be dead before you're 40. And I had just had my experience with the medication. And I said, screw you. and I kind of left. And I found every piece of information that I could find that supported my theory that I could be healthy. And, I didn't need statins and my body would clear out the cholesterol. And I went to 2 doctors for the next 25 years and both of them said the same thing. You've got really high cholesterol, you need to medicate. And I just never went back. And so my relationship with the healthcare system through all of those years was me just saying, I don't believe it. It's not. So the issue is the symptoms for something like cholesterol and heart disease. All those years I was healthy and I was exercising and I was, eating well, but I knew that I had a heart disease. And when I look back, the fear that I always had is I was going to die young of a heart attack. And some part of me always just accepted that and thought it was true. So it was kind of a dark cloud hanging over for a long time. And then that gets me to, 2017 and 2018, and I'm running and biking and my heart's starting to really act up. So I would be out on a run and I could run for about 3/4 of a mile and my heart would like seize up and then I would just walk for a bit, let it reset, and then I would run again. I did this for a year and a half. I did a 70-mile bike ride in Puyallup down south of Seattle. And I'm climbing a 3-mile hill and my heart is just bonking over and over. And I'm just down to the slowest pedal that I can possibly do. It's amazing that I lived. So I'm doing that. But when I'm running, I can walk. And when I'm biking, I can coast. But we were living on Lake Sammamish and one morning I went out for a swim and I make it maybe, 1/4 of a mile offshore in the lake and my heart bonks, but now I can't slow it down. So I'm in the water and I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to drown and I'm going to go to the bottom of the lake. Nobody knows I'm out here. No one's going to know where I am. And I realize I've got to slow my heart rate down. And so I just kind of go on my back. And at that point I've been, learning sort of Buddhist teachings for the better, maybe 6-7 years. And so I just start breathing. I start doing deep breathing. I'm on my back and I'm looking up and I'm just trying to breathe and slow my heart rate down. And finally it kind of slows down enough. And so I kind of make my way really slowly back to shore and I get up from shore and I'm like, I got a problem. I have to go in and really get this checked out. So that started the whole journey in 2018, which became a really fast path into, being in the surgery ward.
You're in the middle of the lake, ocean. What was it?
Lake Sammamish. So it's sort of like, I don't know, 15 minutes east of Seattle.
And were you with anybody?
Nope, swimming by myself. Morning swim out in the water. There's this ancient sunken forest that was right in front of the house that we had right on the lake. And I would swim out because it was protected. Boats couldn't get in there. And I would swim and I'd use these sunken logs as posts along the way to figure out how far I was. But I was in between them, so I couldn't get to any of them. And I'm just looking around and, I was used to the experience and the feeling. But when I was running or biking, I could stop enough that my heart would reset. And this is the thing, if I could tell any message from all of this, it's listen to your body because for the better part of a year and a half, my body was yelling at me. It's like, red lights, there's a problem. But in my mind, I'm just like, oh, I'm getting old. I must be out of shape. I have to work harder. And so through that whole thing, I'm exercising harder. I'm pushing harder, because I've got this thing in the back of my mind that's saying, you've got to stay in shape. If you don't stay in shape, you're dead. And so, but this is how out of touch we can be with ourselves, which is that during that phase, I'm still not connecting the dots because I've gotten so good at essentially lying to myself about what's going on in my body.
Yeah. And for myself as well, because I had a widowmaker, we kind of talked about this, and it was the same thing. And I kept going back to CrossFit. I was yawning. I was yawning in the middle of a workout, right? There was these little subtle signs that were telling me, and mine didn't go for a year. It was like a 4-day thing. And then I went back to CrossFit again on Monday, and I was pushing hard at 5:30 in the morning, and I just felt like my chest was blowing up. Like I wasn't.
Mhm.
You were able to reset. For me, it was the opposite. It felt like the pressure just kept building and building, like a balloon was blowing up or a basketball. So I think for anybody out there listening, I mean, it's important. Like you said, I know better now. I mean, even when I twitch, I go, huh,
Mhm.
you think about it differently. So here you are, you're out in this water, you made it back to shore. Did you even have one of those like triathlon little floaty things that they
Mm-mm.
wear when they're swimming out there? But
No,
no,
nothing.
no boats in the water, I
No,
guess there.
no
Um,
flotation support.
and you went to the beach, and then what happened? How did you get to the hospital? Or you just, like you
I
said,
didn't
you
go to the
just
hot.
went back to
No,
normal life?
no. I went back in the house and I told my wife. I said, I think something's up with my heart. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who I think 4 or 5 years earlier had told me about a cardiologist. I've had a number of friends along the way who are kind of like, you're, what are you doing? Like, why are you not taking medication? I would tell them I didn't talk about it much because I didn't like to talk about it because I didn't really want to hear about what people had to say
Yeah.
because I couldn't relate because people couldn't relate. And so my feeling was, I'm making life or death decisions with my health, and people are giving me their like top of mind perspective
Yeah.
about what they think, and they're not in it. It's not that level of a decision for them. So that was my thinking then. And this guy, my friend Matthew, had sent me, he said you should talk to this cardiologist, and so I reached out, I sent an email. I said, hey, who's that cardiologist that you said I should talk to? And so I made an appointment and I went in, and from there it all cascaded. So we go in, they do the blood work. I go back, the next week, and he's like, your cholesterol's 400, your LDL's 320. We want to send you in for a stress test. So I go in for the stress test, and I know what's going to happen because I felt it so many times, and I'm kind of dreading it. So I go in for the stress test, and they wire me up. They attach all the probes, put me on the exercise machine, and I start building up. And I'm just like, it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. And then sure enough, like it all contracts. They pull me off. They put me on the chair. Their faces change. They realize like my heart is really seizing up. So they put me on the bed. They get my heart rate to calm down. The machines are making all the different gestures of what's going on. And then they calm me down and they let me leave. And I was like, oh, they let me leave. So that must mean I'm okay. And so I leave and I'm driving away. And then 5 minutes later, I get the call. They're like, well, we saw something and we want to get you in for stents. We think you're going to need stents because the lower part of your heart is really having some trouble. So they booked me for stents. And I go into the hospital. And so we have a board of advisors meeting that day. And so I tell, my partner Nelson, I tell the rest of the team, I'm like, okay, I've got a minor thing. I need to go into the hospital. I'll be out by 11, but we should probably move this meeting. I'll tell the folks that I've got a minor thing and we'll put it off a couple of weeks. And, so I go into the hospital and they run the wire up to do the angiogram, and they'll use that same line to put in stents. They wheel me into the operating theater, and then I'm looking up at the screen, and then the doctor comes in and he looks up and he says, oh, we're not doing stents. He said, you're going to need open heart surgery. You're 100% blocked here, here, here. And he's pointing on the screen to places, and I can see that my blood is just backing up. It's just like the blood hits this thing, and then the tributaries go around it and try and flow in. And I'm looking at my heart, trying to get blood, and it's not even working hard. I'm just relaxing, lying down on this bed. So I'm watching it. I see it with my own eyes, what's going on. And I'm thinking about all the times that I've pushed through and how could I have possibly even lived? And I just see it. It's pumping. And he said, you're going to need open heart surgery. And it just hits me. He's like, I'm like, man, they're going to cut me open. They're going to break my chest. They're going to saw me. And so they wheel me back into the prep room. And I asked the nurse to leave me alone. And they kind of closed the blind for a second. I just break down for 5 minutes, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready. And I called my wife and I said, it didn't happen. I'm going to have heart surgery. So then I start planning for it. And while I'm scheduled, it's like 3 weeks out. I go to the cardiologist and I said, so, I'm running a company. Like, what should I do in the meantime? And he goes, oh, just don't start anything new. I said, okay, I won't start anything new. And in the time between then and when I go in for heart surgery, my body just starts falling. And so by the time I get to surgery, I can't walk up 2 stairs without having to stop and get my breath. So I know I'm basically dead in that period of time. I can't do anything. And at the same time, I've got 2 kids and I'm at home. And so I get my will done. I get my advanced directive done. I'm setting it all up. I'm like, you don't know what happens after surgery. You could have brain damage. You could be physically damaged. You might not wake up. All these different things can happen. So you're just sort of planning for it. But, all the time I stop talking to people because when I tell someone I'm having heart surgery, they freak out. And so I just, I don't really want to hear people freak out during that phase. My wife and I make the decision. We're like, we're just going to do this really calmly. We'll let the kids know what's going on. We're going to be calm and quiet about the whole thing. And that was the best decision that we made. And then I go in for surgery and, count down from 10. And by the time you hit 8, you're out. And then you wake up and it's all different.
It is, and we're going to show a couple pictures here. So if you don't like hospital photos, I might want to just know that it's coming.
We haven't seen Frankenstein.
Yeah, we got some Frankenstein photos definitely coming. Leading up to this conversation, though, Aaron, what you learned afterwards is really important to what you just said, because in the time from being told you needed open heart surgery to the time that you went in for the surgery, there's a lot of trauma there, meant personally for you, for your family, for your kids, the unknowns, the certainties. You're hurrying up and getting wills updated, trusts updated, all that stuff, right? And we're going to get into all of that because that's what you're working on now and helping people through. But I just wanted to let people know that, that's a key part of this story moving forward. It's not just about having heart surgery. It's about all the things that happened before as well as after. Correct?
Yeah. Well, it's part of what I learned after, so you'll see in the pictures, like when I woke up in the hospital, wake up with a breathing tube down my throat. So I wake up in the hospital and I'm lying there and I've got a breathing tube down my throat. And they say, I'm in just massive amounts of pain. And so I ask for a pen, and with my left hand, I write down pain. And the nurse says, well, we can't give you any pain meds until you can breathe on your own. So I'm like, okay, I got to breathe on my own. And I take a breath and it knocks me out because of the pain. And so I pass out and then I wake up again. I'm like, okay, breathe on your own, breathe, pass out, wake up. And then finally I'm like, okay, breathe on my own. And I just kind of concentrate. And again, I just do the breathing. So I concentrate, quiet, breathe. And then when I breathe on my own, they give me the pain meds, which settles it down. And then I look and I see this on my arm, which I wasn't expecting because I went in for a quadruple bypass and they gave me a quintuple. And so that meant that they had to harvest arteries from my mammary, from my leg, and from my arm. And I saw this, foot-long scar on my arm. It's cut on my arm. And I just was like, oh, interesting. It wasn't a big deal because I was so tubed and cut and carved. And so then it's all like literally starting all over. So can you sit up? Can you stand? Can you walk? So a day and a half in the ICU. And then 3 days in recovery, in the recovery ward, and then back home. And so that whole experience was it's really humbling more than anything, because you wake up and you realize the truth of how impermanent your body is. You realize that your body is just a shell, right? And you realize how delicate and fragile the shell is. And so living inside the shell. So yeah, the tube in the middle, that's the middle cut is from the solar plexus, where, there's a big tube going in there. There's cuts on the throat, on the chest. And so you're just carved up. And you're very kind of like, for a period of time after surgery, it's really emotional, right? You're very emotional. You kind of highs and lows and you're all over the place. Most heart surgery patients experience this. I've been coaching a lot of heart surgery patients through their experience. And this is pretty common. Pretty intense emotions. And you're just, on the one side, you're in a lot of discomfort because your sternum's broken. That's the big deal. It's hard to breathe, right? Because your sternum was sawed open. And now, like I still have like 100 staples in my sternum. And so that, waking up and feeling like that was humbling. But at the same time, there's this really deep appreciation for being alive, and a very deep feeling of connection with other people, like a real feeling of intimacy and feeling of being connected with other people in a way that I'd never felt in my life. And the issue that I had, though, is when I woke up from surgery, and then I'd gone into it trying to learn so much about what the surgical procedure was like, that I hadn't really thought about the fact that when I woke up, I was like, oh, you know what? I haven't really done anything about my underlying disease. I have the same disease. All they've done is cleared out all of the results. So they've cleared out all the clogging and they've cleared out the arteries, but I still have a genetic cholesterol condition, and I'm going to be having another surgery unless I can get to the bottom of that. So I had that was what started some pretty, significant lifestyle changes. I went vegan. And I made my peace with the medication. I was like, okay, you know what? I love doctors. Doctors are my best friends now. So let's get in on the medication. And that was the start of it. So I started on went back to see the doctor, and then started into rehab. And when I went to rehab, really opened my eyes, because suddenly I'd come out of a phase. So since I was scheduled for surgery and then went through surgery and got to rehab, through that whole period, I didn't talk to anyone who had been through it. I just didn't, no one recommended it. I didn't think to do it. I was in so much just, trying to just, stay with it and move through it, that I never talked to anybody who had been through it. And then when I got to rehab, I suddenly was talking with other people who knew exactly what I'd just been through. And they were the first people who understood what it was like. And that was a big eye opener. When I got to rehab, I looked, and there was a woman who was, had a stroke and couldn't speak and was learning to walk again. And I was just looking at it, thinking about how thin the line was between what I'd experienced and being dead or being permanently, disabled, and just how grateful I was to be alive. But at the same time, I was like, 2 weeks after surgery, I had to get, on a train and go down to the factory and let someone go. And then I was raising Series A capital. I was raising, $23 million for the company, starting 2-3 weeks after having heart surgery. So there were part of it I had integrated, and part of it I had sort of understood. And then part of it I hadn't. I was still in performance mode to a certain degree, because I was like, okay, I'm going to have the surgery. I'm going to go through rehab. I'm going to recover. I'm athletic. I know how to do this. I've recovered from injuries before. And then I'm going to put the whole thing in the rearview mirror. And that's just not what happened, which was kind of a great thing in the end, but difficult at the time.
So what did you learn through the surgery and also through the recovery, right? When it comes to, kind of what you were just alluding to, like your lifestyle changes, the mental side of it. How much did you suffer after that surgery mentally before you started really thinking clearly about the next steps?
Well, a lot, but the thing is, I didn't allow it right at the time. So there was a whole traumatic experience, but it wasn't the first trauma I'd had in my life. And so what I did is I did what most people do when they go into heart surgery, which is they just, they shut down. And so shut down in the same way that they've shut down to whatever other traumas have happened. And everybody has their own mechanisms. Some people get really angry. Some people get really sad. I just went inside. I went internally, and I just said, okay, I know how to do tough things. I've been through tough things. This is just another tough thing, and I'm going to power through it. I know how to do this, because it was part of my identity, right? Part of who I thought I was.
Right.
Where it fell apart, though, was, so I got the numbers under control. So I take injections every 2 weeks. I take pills. I got a vegan diet. And so with all of that, I got my numbers down. So my numbers are now low. I've got low cholesterol. I've got 135 cholesterol. I've got an LDL of 45. These are really great numbers that I'd never had in my life.
Right.
But at the same time, something wasn't working. And so when I was going through recovery and rehab, there's this thing that they set you with, which says, we want to get you back to normal. But the problem is, after you wake up, normal's gone. Normal, there was no more getting back to normal. That whatever that was over. That body, that identity, that life was kind of over. So what happened to me was I didn't recover. And then they found that I'd had a heart attack and my heart was scarred. So I had a scarred heart. 3 of the bypass grafts hadn't worked. And so they said, oh, it's permanently damaged. There's nothing you can do now. And that was hard. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, there's no recovery. There's no getting back to normal. That ship has sailed. And so that was the difficult part, because I fought that for the better part of a year. And I was like, I just wouldn't accept it. And so, and in not accepting it, I just drained my energy. I was just fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And then one day, you know, through that and through I'd had a coach and a sort of Buddhist teacher throughout that whole process who was encouraging me to just kind of stay with it. She said, don't look away, just don't look away, experience everything you're going through. And I realized what was happening through that was I was experiencing all the difficult things that I just wouldn't allow myself to experience when they were happening. And so the difficulty of it in my body through the course of a couple months, about a year ago, started to clear. And when it cleared and I just accepted it, then everything shifted and changed. And then, you know, the crazy part of it is I had the exact same nuclear imaging test done in November. So whatever that is, 5-6 months ago. And they looked at it and they said, oh, your heart's healed. They said, your heart's actually healed. I said, how's that possible? And they said, well, we don't know, but we can show you. And so they're showing me on the monitor, and I know why. And it's because I accepted it. And I know that the healing sort of came from within, and it's kind of a crazy story, but it happened in my body. And so I tried to, like, when this was happening, I just went to learn everything that I could learn about how trauma works and how neuroplasticity works and how healing works and all those different things, just to understand it, because it had happened in my body. So that kind of led to a lot of new stuff, led to writing. I took a bunch of, courses to be a coach. And then sort of got to the foundation for healthcare quality work, which I can talk about as well, if I assume we have some time.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about it. You mentioned neuroplasticity. Can you just explain the we're a bunch of nail biting, hammering folks out here. What is that?
So until about 20 years ago, people believed that the nervous system was fixed. So once you'd established your neural pathways, which essentially govern the sort of stimulus response system. So you perceive, so think of it like, a good way to think of it is in terms of how people get into chronic stress. So chronic stress is, you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system says there's a problem, we have to get into fight or flight mode. The parasympathetic nervous system steps in and says, okay, fight or flight mode is over. Now let's return back to normal. A lot of people, through conditioning, stay in fight or flight mode for way too long. And that's what leads to chronic stress. Neuroplasticity, which is only really about 20 years old as an understanding of how the nervous system works, says that if there's a clearing of a pathway, so let's say you clear trauma, you have some trauma, like, let's say you got attacked by a gorilla when you were 10. And that was just crazy. And you ended up in the hospital. And then every time you see a gorilla now, even if it's a nice gorilla, you go into a reaction because you remember what it was like, and you never really fully processed it, because how do you process getting attacked by a gorilla? So at some point, though, you can go back and work on it and reprocess it and clear it. And when you do that, you can remove that direct line from I see a gorilla to I'm scared for my life. And then the system can open up again, where you can then say, okay, I see a gorilla. And the nervous system says, oh, gorilla, what should I do about this? And there's not a direct connection. So neuroplasticity is the ability for the body to create new neural pathways based on stimulus. So it's a big deal when you look at clearing trauma. So it comes up a lot for heart patients where, let's say you had a heart attack while you were exercising, while you were running. Then after the heart surgery and after the rehab, you could be very fearful to run. For good reason. You could be out there running and your heart could be totally healthy. Everything could have cleared, but your mind remembers what it was like when you had the heart attack when you were running. And so your body, which has no understanding of these stories that we create in our mind, your body, every time you run, could be in the fear of having a heart attack, even though it's not there anymore, but it can be cleared. And so when it's cleared and dealt with and experienced, then that neural pathway opens up again. That's how trauma gets cleared. So what I realized about surgery was like, well, every one of these surgeries is essentially a scheduled trauma. Like it's on the calendar. Like we know it's a trauma. We're going to go through this trauma, but we don't do anything about it. And so everybody just gets traumatized. So all these people who are post-surgery, and there's 30 to 40 million major surgeries in the US every year, 310 million surgeries around the world every year, 500,000 open heart surgeries, major heart surgeries in the US. They're all traumas, all of them. And so that got me to thinking about, well, like, what could we do about this? And that, I started a not-for-profit, Mended Hearts of Puget Sound, after my experience at the rehab clinic, connecting with other patients that had been through it, just how beneficial that was. So I started that about 3 years ago, and we have monthly meetings that bring people together after heart events, basically just to share stories and connect. And it makes a big difference for people. Like, you really see it lighten. And then I joined the management committee of a group called the Foundation for Healthcare Quality in the Washington State, which is the group of cardiac surgeons and cardiologists who are in charge of all the quality data, rates of rehospitalization, rates of, mortality, all the different techniques that are used, measuring them, seeing which ones are effective, and making sure that best practices are followed. And I pitched them on a peer coaching model. And I said, I want to run a series of patients through a peer coaching program, basically to help heart surgery patients actually have the experience instead of shutting down, and then see what that does to rates of anxiety and depression and cardiac rehab participation. Because if you can move the needle on depression, and if you can move the needle on rehab participation, only 30% of people go to rehab. You can make a big difference on outcomes. And this group that I work with is very interested in outcomes. So we ran this pilot project. I took a whole bunch of coaching training programs to develop a methodology to specifically coach heart patients. I meet with the patients. So the hospital Swedish cardiac surgery clinic referred 10 patients to me. I booked 2 sessions before surgery, 2 sessions after surgery, and essentially partially provided peer mentoring. Like, here's what you're going through, here's what to expect, here's how, here's the process, here's what's going to happen when you wake up, all these things that just people don't tell you. And then the other side was to work with them, sort of breathing exercises and different things to allow them to tune into what was going on. So to experience the anxiety, to experience everything that they were going through instead of repressing it, with the idea that would give them a healthier way to move through it, and less trauma and less depression. And we're just writing up the results, and they've been incredible. So the results have been, 100% of them say this should be available for every patient that goes through heart surgery. And then the light kind of went off for me, which was, it's crazy that, 30, 40 million people go into major surgery, or 500,000 heart patients go into major surgery, and don't talk with everybody who's been through it. You have all of these people who are having the experience every year, and then they kind of go off into the distance, and a new batch of people come along and they get traumatized. And so we're just building up this cumulative collective, traumatic debt. And it would just be a function of, so patient circle was an idea to say, let's close the circle. Let's create, a community where when you're going for heart surgery, there are options, right, to connect with. And it could be, taking courses or accessing peer coaching, or just asking questions, or connecting with people in the community. Just having that type of facility available was the genesis behind that. So I'm just kind of getting that moving now.
No, you know what? I think it's great. I to this day, if I'm running, working out, and I feel something, like, it's still a mental thing for me. Like, I know everything going on in there, right? Hit my mic, sorry. So, and I remember even after my heart stent and my Widowmaker, I was exterior wise, I was perfectly fine. But interior, it was always in the back of my head for a long, long time, right?
Who did you talk to?
Nobody.
That's the thing. I mean, that's the whole thing. No, people, we just don't talk to, and it's men and women. I mean, it's a lot of people. Yeah.
And I still haven't until we started talking. So maybe I'll be talking to you.
Yeah. Well, you should. That's what I'm here for it. That's the whole, a lot of it's been, it's been a year and a half or 2 years. And most of it's just been just doing it,
right.
Like, because the thing is, I met another founder. One of our investors reached out to me. This was maybe 8 months or 9 months after I'd had surgery. And he said, I've got one of the companies in my portfolio. The guy just had a triple bypass and he's having a tough time. He goes, would you mind, do you mind chatting with him? And so I went and met him at a cafe, and I walk into the cafe, and I'm like, oh, and this was his first time out of the house since, it was 2 weeks after surgery. So it was the first time out of the house, and I met him at a cafe, and I'm looking around. I'm like, I'm going to find a guy who's like just come out of heart surgery. I see a guy sitting in the corner. He's like this. And I was like, that's the guy. And so, and because the thing is, when you're after surgery, you don't want anyone coming near your chest. You just like, don't bump into me. Don't come near my chest. It's like, it's so raw. And so I look at him and he's, he's on the verge. He's just living every moment on the verge of tears, and I go and I sit down across from him and we start talking, and I look at him and I just give him this big smile. And I'm like, you'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like you're feeling so raw right now. But you're also feeling so alive, like you're so grateful to be alive, so tender. And I just remember looking at him and in every cell of my body, I knew how he felt. And
Right.
I also knew that nobody else did, right? Like nobody else in the cafe, like would have understood, but I did. And I looked at him and I was like, and I also knew that he was going to be okay and that it would change. And I knew how, and that kind of like opened my eyes. I was like, this guy is just, there's so many people that go through this and there's so many people who have been through it. And it's just crazy that it doesn't connect.
I'm going to put this up here real quick because I think it's pertinent to what you just said, right? It's you don't have to walk alone. Patience helping patients. And I mean, this is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so the cool thing is, it's one of these like crazy ideas that was really not like, it was based on an instinct. I was like, okay, I know that peers can help. I know that coaching is a useful methodology here. I don't know what the program really needs to be. I know that it needs to be before surgery because you're just spinning. And I know that after surgery, it's totally different. But I knew kind of what the issues were. And so I started designing the program, and then we started formalizing it, and then we started formalizing it more. And I was like, wow, this really works. So, the next step is to kind of take it forward, because if you look at the numbers, it's basically a way for a lot of people who have been through surgery, who have coaching experience or want to gain coaching experience, to build a living doing something that's needed. But if you look at the numbers, it's entirely viable. Everything about it is viable. It doesn't take more work from doctors. It doesn't take more work from nurses.
Yeah.
And if you look at the impact on, someone did a study. If you take the rates of participation in cardiac rehab from 30% to 80%, you save 25,000 lives and 185,000 hospitalizations per year. So you just look at just that side of it, just rehab. Never mind that 30-40% of people experience depression and what that does to rehospitalizations, visits to emergency, resurgery. Like all these things are impacted by that. So what's interesting about it is it's entirely viable. And so the next step is we want to take it to a larger sample size so that we can, expand it. But it's all there. It's entirely doable. The cool thing about it is coming out the other side of it, like, I just kind of did it and, coached a bunch of people through it and watched their experience of it. And then we did the surveys and they were just like, I don't know what I would have done without this.
Right.
And so you're like, okay, I think we're onto something. So that's kind of become, it wasn't something I was thinking to do. And then it just became something that seems like it's needed. So I thought, okay, well, let's kind of take the next step with it and see what it would mean to stand it up and make it more broadly available.
I mean, you took trauma and you basically looked it right in the face and said, yeah, we're going to do something different here. That's what I love about it. I mean, that's basically what you did. You didn't think this was the path you were going down, but there was a higher calling for you to do something somewhere.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you though, I didn't there were a lot, I didn't know that there was another side. That was the thing about it. Like when I was in the depths of it, to me, I was like, there's a feeling, it kind of gives me chills a little bit, but there's a feeling that you can get into, which I know a lot of patients get into because I've heard them say it to me. There's a feeling you're just waiting to die.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you've had the thing, it's for whatever reason, you're not recovering or it's not coming back. The whole thing about going back to normal is not happening. And so you're like, okay, so now I'm just waiting to die. And then you come to terms with that. And the thing that I think that I've come into, which I really appreciate and I think is something to move on, is that I did heal, right? And I did somehow make it to the other side of that. And in that was able to see some of the ways that it worked, and sort of thanks to maybe an entrepreneurial background, understanding maybe how to apply that. So how that could turn into something that's repeatable, that could actually be useful in not just my experience, but how could other people have that experience as well?
Looking back, on your experience, what are some of the things that you kind of recognized or acknowledged, but you didn't really know? Or, I mean, for other people, what should they be paying attention to? Like, in like, this is the biggest and hardest question I know to answer, but like, what advice would you give people that are out there watching this?
Well, I think there's two big ones. One is to listening to the body, right? Because the body, the it's the strangest thing. Like in our minds, most people spend most of their time in the past and the future. Like very few people are really present right now, not in their
Hmm.
heads. It's a challenging, difficult place to get to. I mean, it just is. So the mind is in stories, right? It's in the past, it's in the future. It's like, worried about something in the future, or, thinking about something from the past. Meanwhile, the body has no concept of, the body is just present. So the
Yeah.
mind's telling the body all the time about these things that are going. That's how chronic stress becomes a problem, because the mind is telling the body that there's a problem all the time. And the body is just worked up and worked up and worked up, and it starts to build. So the first thing is to really listen to the body, whatever that takes and whatever it means for you personally. Like for me, it was, I, my body was telling me for a year and a half and I didn't listen. And I didn't listen because I didn't want to hear it. Right. I had a story about who I was, and that I was, healthy, and that I was indestructible, and that I was, a certain type of person, and that this was not possible. Right. In my mind, it was like, I'll either be this way and alive or dead. Right. That was kind of like, those are like the two options. And it was all a
Yeah.
story. None of it was true. It was all just a story that I put together when I was younger. We all do it as a way to keep myself safe. Right. So here's a story I build about myself. Here's who I am. But the stories are just stories. So the first thing is to listen to the body, like what's really happening in the body. Sometimes it's blood pressure, sometimes it's feelings in the heart, sometimes it's weight. It has all these different things that are symptoms of, something is out of kilter. There's a fragmentation. And the
Hmm.
fragmentation is the sort of mind, body, soul aspect, right? Like the body's telling you like something's off. And so to listen to that. And then the other part is to know that you're not alone, right? To know that that we're all connected, and people are all connected, and the idea that we are alone and isolated, because there are four main contributors. Dr. Dean Ornish has done a bunch of work around like what really contributes to heart disease and major issues, and I would say that they probably apply to most chronic disease. But it's diet and exercise, genetics, quadrants: diet and exercise, genetics, chronic stress, and emotional isolation. And those are really big ones. And so it's a big question, like, am I isolated? Do I isolate myself? Am I alone? And the answer to that can be, can you talk with someone? And who would it be? And sometimes it might, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's someone who you can just start to talk with. But this, just starting to unravel a little bit that idea that we're all alone. You know what I mean? Because it's just not true, and because we're all connected, and that feeling of being connected, and that feeling of you know being able to start to release some of this difficulty that's just stored inside, and everything difficulty just pounded inside the body, just starting to let that out a little bit, and
Right.
finding a way to start to talk with someone.
Aaron, best way to connect with you. We have some of your Mended Hearts Puget Sound up here, but
Mhm.
there's a couple of links that you sent us, and I think it's good just for people to know that there are places you can go to get help, to start talking to somebody. I mean, obviously you're just one person, but there's a
Mhm.
network of people out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there. Mended Hearts of Puget Sound is great. It's specific for people in the region who have had heart disease or heart surgery, typically heart surgery, and it can be anything: stents. We have a lot of people with AFib. People have had sudden cardiac arrest. We have meetings once a month. That's one. I write. This is my Substack. So I write on the topic, and this is really just me diving into some of these subjects and trying to make sense of them. So I write about my experience with death. I write about, my experience with changing. My last post was about what it's like to be healthy. It's such an unfamiliar place. I'm kind of grappling with, like, what does it mean to be healthy? I haven't been healthy since I've been an adult. I don't know how it feels. And so now I'm starting to grapple with that. And then Patient Circle is just starting. So it's the one, I think the second one from the left up there. And Patient Circle at this point is to just sign up. So if you're interested in this model, we're just kind of signing up people who are interested to build out this community of patients who are helping patients. And this is what we'll build out as we move into the next phase of the model and expanding the peer coaching for heart surgery patients, and making that more broadly available and running the next phase of testing with it. But honestly, like for me, my website, so aaronholm.com, or just emailing me, aaron@aaronholm.com. I'm connected to a lot of resources around this. I'm connected with a lot of the advocacy groups. So, there's Family Heart Organization that specializes in people with high levels of Lp(a). I'm connected with the folks who manufacture the drugs that I make. I'm connected with the American Heart Association, with Mended Hearts. For whatever reason, I've gone down the rabbit hole with this stuff. So I'm pretty much connected with a lot of the people who are involved. And I really don't mind just helping and connecting anybody who wants to connect. I have access to different coaches and therapists who I've worked with. And a lot of times it's just as simple as like, I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do. That's really the starting point. It starts with just being honest. Like, I don't know. I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do. And then I'm happy to take that conversation all day long and help anybody who wants to figure out what to do from there.
Aaron, you're helping leaders be better leaders. You're helping people be better people. This whole thing really has come full circle, for you. So I just want to say, thank you so much for everything you did while, with us in the offsite space, and everything you're doing now for those of us that are in the Heart Club and those of us that are just having mental health issues. I mean, it's all relative, and the fact that you're taking a lead on this is commendable, and I respect that. And I'm very happy that you're doing this. I'm very happy that you took the time to come on the show. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate you giving it a platform and an audience.
Is there anything that I left out, or anything that you would like to leave with the people before we wrap this up?
No, not at all. I think the thing that I would leave with is being hopeful. Like, I think part of why I do all this stuff is because I went through it. I went through it all, the whole thing. And for whatever reason, I went through it. And so, part of it on the other side of it is to just know that it can be okay. I mean, I'm healthy and have really just love, being alive and everything that means. And so just to know that there's a way, know that there's a way through, and there's a way forward, and there's another side, and it's all there.
That's it. You're not on an island by yourself.
Yep.
Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dave.
Everybody else out there, it is Mental Health Month. Pick up the phone and call somebody you haven't talked to in a while. If you're in the service, call your battle buddy. Everybody's always going through something somewhere, and you can put a smile on somebody's face or make a difference to them at this very moment. So just take a moment and say thank you. Heck, call your mom, whatever. Just do something. Aaron, stay right there. I'll come back to you. The rest of you, say thank you to these sponsors and supporting members as well, because these kind of conversations cannot happen without them. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you. And as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for watching.